How's it going, guys? I got a question here from Lewis, who posted on the last video, which was a review of the Samyang T1.5 85mm cinema lens. He asks, can you do a tutorial on how to shoot at this focal length? Like, I struggle with finding the right composition and it's not stabilized. Any tips? Well, Lewis, I have a couple tips on how to shoot at longer focal lengths and still keep it stabilized. So generally, when we look at high-end professional movies, they use longer focal lengths such as 50mm or 85 or even longer to convey a couple of different emotions. The first would be that the point of view is very far away from the subject or whatever it's trying to shoot, and it's just getting a very distant glance at what is going on. It's also very investigative, like you're looking through a telescope or something like that and seeing more details farther away than you would with your own eyes. The second, and I guess I'd say the most popular form of using longer focal lengths, is whenever there's kind of like a dialogue and it's cutting between two people. Usually it'll start out nice and wide with like a 24, might move into a 35, and then when it punches into a 50 or even an 85, that's when like something really dramatic happens, like emotionally, and it just zooms in on their face. You see this all the time, and usually it cuts so smoothly you don't even notice that you keep getting zoomed in on this person's face, so you see more emotion. It just makes everything more intense. If you haven't seen that before, next time you're watching an emotional dialogue, definitely take a look at that. So Lewis, when you say that you're struggling to find good composition when you're using a longer focal length, first, think about what your subject is and what the emotion is, and usually when you're using a longer focal length, it will be more emotional. And then really focus in on the center of the subject and then think of that as the center of the composition instead of whatever the whole thing is. So a good example is here with your face. A standard composition like waist up would have your head being on the top third. Now the nose is the center of your face, and as you zoom in, you'll be zooming into the nose, which is just awkward. Usually you want to zoom into your eyes. So think about the one singular point of the subject that you want to film and then work your composition around that point. Finally, some tips on stabilization. As you know, when you're shooting at longer focal lengths, any micro adjustments are magnified because you are zoomed in so far. It's funny, if you've ever looked through a telescope and tap it, everything just goes bonkers. So stabilization is absolutely critical on longer focal length lenses. So the Samyang 85 T1.5 does not have any form of stabilization, which most cinema lenses are not going to have stabilization. So if you're in this situation, I would almost guarantee you're going to have to do something different than just hand holding the camera. Now on my 1DX Mark II, this can go up to 120 frames per second, and oftentimes I will just hand hold this and be nice and smooth and then slow it down in post. That's an awesome way to kind of fake stabilization because it just slows everything down and looks very, very smooth. Now my 7D Mark II and the 80D that I'm filming on right now go up to 60 FPS, and you can try that. It'll do the same effect, but not quite as smoothly as the 1DX. So if you can't shoot at a higher frame rate to smooth it down later, definitely think about putting it on a tripod, even though I know that's kind of boring, but just a standard tripod shot that's not shaking at all is going to be better than a very shaky shot. Or invest in like a cheap glide cam. Actually, I have one right here. So this is my full-size one. It's the Glide Gear DNA 5050, and I've also got a smaller one. I believe this is by iMorden. I'll leave links to both of these. This guy was like under $100, and it can fit an 80D on there quite well. And if you throw a longer focal length like this on there, probably a prime lens so it's not too heavy, this guy will make your shots super, super smooth. I've got two more stabilization tips. If you have your camera strap, you can actually put that on your camera and then use that sort of as an extra pivot point, just so you can hold on to that and then move it around, and it's a little more stable, but kind of a janky solution there. My final tip on how to get smoother shots would be to invest in a gimbal. Even though they're quite expensive, you will be really impressed with the shots. That's why I absolutely love gimbals, for that very reason. That's going to wrap it up. Thank you, Lewis, for that awesome question. Hopefully this answered it, or at least got you on the direction that you were looking for. Thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget to keep it pro.